I really did feel like I was grieving who Maya was, right? Every possible future was now gone from sight, and I didn't know who I was or who I could be. And it's taken me a while to learn a valuable lesson from that experience, but I want to share that with listeners because it would have been helpful to me then, and it is absolutely helpful to me now as I think about my relationship with motherhood. And that is to anchor our self-identity, not simply to what we do, but to why we do that thing. So what do I mean by that? Ask yourself, what is it that makes you love the things you love? When I asked myself what I loved about the violin, I realized that emotional connection was at the core. I loved the idea that music gave me a vehicle for feeling deeply connected with other human beings. And just because I lost the violin didn't mean that I lost what led me to love it in the first place. That was still very much intact. That why was still a stable part of me. It was a soft landing. And if I could anchor my identity to that rather than the role of being a violinist, then I had something that could carry me through into the next transition.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jay Scherr, host of Business Minds Coffee Chat, where you get a captivating look inside the minds of game changers, risk takers, and visionaries who turn ideas into breakthroughs that shake up the world. Our mission is to give you fresh ways to think that spark growth in your business and life so you can make a mark that lasts. I thought a good starting point just to kick the conversation off would be for you to share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself.
Ooh, that's such a great question. I think I appreciate most that I am very receptive to feedback. So I try not to take incoming feedback too personally. I always love a growth opportunity. I always love an opportunity to see things differently. At work, I'm sort of known as the leader of my team who is very willing to say that she was wrong, to say that she's changing her mind as a result of new information or new evidence. And that's the biggest compliment that I can get from my teammates because it's something that I want to role model. I want to role model humility and the idea that we will all be better if we're not too prideful about the beliefs or opinions that we carry and that we're open to changing those beliefs over time.
That is so good. So I've got two questions for you regarding that. And I had, of course, no idea what your
Yeah,
response was going to be.
I didn't either until you asked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of feedback, share with us what you think is most important when it comes to, number one, providing feedback, and then also on the other side of that, receiving feedback.
Yeah, I think that one reason our walls can go up when we feel that someone is either criticizing some aspect of who we are or is criticizing a point of view we carry is that it can feel like they are questioning in some sense our fundamental sense of humanity, right? Maybe they are questioning whether I'm moral. Maybe they're questioning whether I'm kind. Maybe the misunderstanding we had on the phone makes them think that I didn't have enough empathy for this person. Whatever it is, we want to make sure that when we're giving feedback to other people, we are affirming in that process that we care about the person, that we assumed good intent, and that we are sharing this information because we think it might be in their best interest. And think about who's willing to give you feedback. Well, ignore the internet for a second, where everyone's willing to give you feedback, whether or not they care about you. But in your actual life, more often than not, people are providing counter arguments or challenging your points of view. They're giving you new ways of seeing the world, new ways of seeing yourself because they care about you, because they want you to live a better life. And when you remind yourself of that, then you can let those walls down a little bit because you think, well, this person would only be sharing this with me if they really had a stake in my future, right? If they didn't care about me at all, why would they care what beliefs I labor under, or what attitudes I have, or how I live my life? And so I try to remind myself that almost inherent in the feedback giving process is some degree of fundamental care and a belief that you're redeemable in this way, right? So unless you're a real jerk, you're often not giving feedback to someone if you believe that they have no ability to change. Then you're just being mean, right? It's like, I know
Sure.
it'd be like saying, change your hair color. You can't change your hair color. Well, unless you dye it, but you get my point. But
Sure.
presumably, if you've seen someone err in some way, or you think they're carrying a harmful point of view, you think they're capable of changing. And so it is a vote of confidence that they believe in your potential as a person. And I think that also can kind of buoy you either, when you're actually on the receiving end.
Beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. So, have you always been one who was interested in receiving feedback and also someone who was interested in growth? I mean, if we go back to childhood, have you
Yeah.
always been that way?
I think I think it was definitely a muscle that I've had to build over time because like all
Hmm.
people, of course we have some pride around our beliefs or around our abilities or what have you. That said, I think one, growing up as the youngest of four kids, you are going to be exposed to multiple viewpoints all the time. And as the youngest, of course, my siblings would, be very happy to humble me or to tell me when they thought I had something wrong. So I think that was one influence that probably led to a slightly more open mind, right? Just growing up in a big family and seeing people you love and care about have different points of view or, um, I could tell my siblings really cared about the type of person I was. And so they would give me feedback about how to be better. And I often took it. I think the other thing is that I grew up as a aspiring concert violinist. And when I started studying at Juilliard, I was getting very specialized feedback and criticism, but I was getting it constantly, right? So when you are playing at those levels and you're performing, your teachers and your peers and the audience members, they are analyzing every single note you play and are deciding, was that in tune? Did she use the right vibrato? Was the tone the right level of whatever? And so I think I was used to being sort of under a microscope when it came to violin performance. And I think when you're constantly getting that kind of feedback, it builds a thicker skin, right? Because again, it's coming from your teachers. They obviously care about you doing well. And it hurts sometimes really badly. I'm not going to lie. It's not like I loved being told that I gave a terrible performance or that I played out of tune. But I think if you get it enough, you become a little bit inured to it, right? You become a little bit desensitized to that emotional punch. Um, I do think that as I've gotten older, I have found that I just really look up to people who are open minded when it comes to any kind of feedback that they receive. The people that I admire the most are the ones who are willing to say, yeah, I did have this point of view, or I did see this situation a certain way, but you're now allowing me to see it from a different vantage point, or you're now allowing me to think that like maybe I had it wrong, or I can understand why that person misinterpreted me. And so when I saw that role modeled in other people, my dad, for example, is someone who's just not that prideful. He's very open to he's a theoretical physicist. He's a very scientific mind, and he's very open to changing his opinion if you give him data. And
Okay.
I've always aspired to be like that. And that's what I'm trying to practice each and every day. But, it takes, I don't want to pretend that I've like figured it out. It takes deliberate, conscious action all the time, because in the moment, let's say my direct report has challenged me on something, right? Part of me is like, I'm your boss, dude. Right? Like, I don't want to have to admit that I was
Sure.
wrong. And then I have to overcome that impulse. And I have to be like, okay, no, you're making a really good point. Or if someone says, hey, I don't think you meant to do this, but you might have hurt this person's feelings unknowingly. You might not have known they were going through this situation or that situation. I try to meet that with, okay, thank you for taking the time to even tell me, because the worst case scenario would have been I unintentionally hurt someone and didn't even realize that I had done that I'd had that impact, but no one in my
Yeah.
life had taken the time to tell me. I'm curious though,
And
Jay,
I
what your relationship is with this whole space. I'm so curious.
Well, thank you for asking. And I was going to share with you, first of all, as you were sharing what you shared, it reminded me of having self-awareness, right? Being able to recognize when either we've hurt someone unintentionally, also, are we truly listening? And when we recognize that someone could benefit from some feedback, are we willing to deliver it in a way that, number one, is it meaningful? Is it kind?
Mhm.
Does it address the very specific instance or the area that they could improve upon? And what is our follow up to that? And also recognizing that we all have blind spots. So, me, I have plenty of them. So, I am wide open to feedback and I look for it. I actually ask for it because there are often situations where people are not maybe as comfortable giving
Absolutely.
feedback. So I'll look for the opportunities. Like as an example, if I give a speech to a group,
Yes.
afterwards, I'll have conversations with people who attended and I'll ask them for some feedback. What did you think about the presentation? What landed? What could I improve upon? Things like that, because I really do want to focus on my own growth. No matter how many times I've done it, I know I can get better. Now, I will share with you, there was one particular conversation, and I remember this as clear as can be, that someone who's very close to me was sharing information. They were going through a difficult time and they were sharing, really deeply sharing. And I did what many of us do and what I often do. I went into help mode, I went into fix it mode, and I'm offering, advice and solutions and whatnot. And this person stopped me midway through one of my brilliant suggestions and said, Jay, you're not listening to me. And I got to tell you, Maya, it really hit like a punch to the gut. And I realized in that moment, this was years ago, but I realized in that moment that we have to meet people where they are. People want to feel seen, heard, and valued. They don't want to necessarily be fixed or to have tools and solutions provided. Not all the time. So today, I try to ask the question, do you want me to just deeply listen?
Mm.
Or are you asking me do you want to share this because you're looking for some guidance or some help?
Yeah.
And does that make sense?
Absolutely. Okay, you're getting so many thoughts flowing in my head. So the first thing I want to share is I really applaud you for proactively searching for feedback because look, after a big talk, you kind of want to just let out that sigh of relief and just think about the fact you got through it. And so it is very admirable that you're going out of your way to get constructive feedback. One cautionary tale that I wanted to give for people like you and me who um, actively seek out feedback and internalize it, right? Like we take it really seriously, is to remember that not all feedback is created equal. Some feedback might not align with your values. You just might not agree with it. You might not think it's in your best interest. It might have ulterior motives around it. We don't know, right?
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you are really considering when you're receiving feedback, who's the messenger? Do they truly have my best interest in mind? For example, as I was mentioning, if you're getting a nasty comment on social media from someone, like you don't have to internalize it. You can just ignore it, right? And so you have to think of feedback as going through a filter of sorts, right? Figure out the parts that you really want to take seriously and that you really do believe will make you better, and then be comfortable disposing of the rest. And I sometimes have trouble with this filtration process. I sometimes take it all in and I'm trying to work on all of it. And then at a certain point, I ask myself, like, wait a second, who am I even solving for? For example, think about my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, right? I have sort of a value system around the show. This is how I want to make the show. I want it to be, this produced, edited version of a person's story. I don't want there to be a big focus on video. I don't want XYZ. And I might get inputs from all these different parts of the business, right? Like, oh, actually, the trend is to do video now, or you need to think about your podcast this way, or some listener says, I don't like Maya's voice. You don't know what you're going to get. I think there have been times where I have wanted to act, like I said, on everyone's guidance. And then I end up in no man's land where I forget what my own values are and why I started the show and what my goals are for the show. So that's the first thing I would say is like, yes, taking feedback, but put it through a filter. And be very thoughtful and deliberate about the kind of feedback that you really do internalize. And also you can stage it out, right? Let's say there's three big pieces of feedback. It's kind
Okay.
of a lot to ask of yourself to do some big overhaul of your personality or your process overnight, right? So you can do it in like little drips. Like, okay, in the coming months, I'm going to work on X. And then after that, maybe I'm going to tackle Y, right? We just don't want to overwhelm ourselves so that we stifle our own creative process. Um, the other thing I was going to say is that when it comes to our belief systems overall, right? When we think
Mm-hmm.
about like the attitudes and beliefs we carry about ourselves and about the world around us, one of the things that I argue in my book, The Other Side of Change, is that change can serve as a moment of revelation where these beliefs and ideas that we have about the world come into the light. They might have been hidden from view prior, and we are forced to re-examine them anew and to really interrogate whether those beliefs and ideas are things we want to continue to hold on to. So in everyday life, we're not waking up every morning thinking, what belief would I like to interrogate today, right? We're busy, we have jobs, we have responsibilities. We
Sure.
don't have the time, given just the demands on our cognition, to really thoughtfully and deliberately evaluate whether every one of the ideas or every one of the beliefs or values we carry are actually the ones we think we should be carrying and are actually based in evidence or truth. And my argument in The Other Side of Change is that it can serve as this valuable inflection point where we realize things about ourselves that may be holding us back. So, an example is I interviewed a woman named Ingrid who felt a lot of shame about her family's Colombian heritage, about the indigenous practices that they engaged in. And she ends up having an experience in her 20s where she gets into a biking accident and develops amnesia. And the amnesia wipes the slate clean. So she has lost so many of her memories. And there's something really curious about the ways the memories return. First, the memories of her family stories come back, and they come back before the memory that she was ashamed of those stories comes back. And so she's able to engage with those memories anew. She's able to see them without that cloud hanging over her of shame and um, anxiety. And by the time the memory comes back that, oh, I'm actually ashamed of these stories, it's too late. She's already renewed her relationship with them. She already sees them for the wonder and beauty that they carry. And it turns out that the reason why Ingrid had this view about her family was based on a simple misunderstanding in childhood. So her mom had cautioned her as a little kid about sharing her family story with others because she was worried that Ingrid might face persecution or criticism or discrimination from people that didn't understand, right? It's not because Ingrid's mom was ashamed of the stories, but little Ingrid's mind interpreted that message as, well, if I'm being told I can't talk about something, then that probably means it's inherently bad. And the reason I shared Ingrid's story, I mean, it's obviously an exceptional story when it comes to amnesia. I don't want anyone to have amnesia, is that it shows that many of the beliefs that we hold on to, especially the ones that are rooted in childhood, are not these sacred, immutable truths that reflect reality in some way. They are based on all sorts of biases and heuristics and popular culture and what a teacher told us when we were 5 in a particularly vulnerable state, or what we heard on TV, or what we saw role modeled to us. And we can sometimes misinterpret those messages or just not evaluate them in ways that hold us back. And for Ingrid, having had this spectacular experience where she was able to experience the family stories before the shame, it empowered her to renew her relationship with her family's history. And fast forward to today, her memoir, which is all about her family story, is a Pulitzer Prize finalist. And I
Amazing.
think that's just a testament to how each of us might be engaging in a self-limited, or each of us might have a set of views that are self-limiting in some way, and is worth taking a moment to step back and ask ourselves, is there good reason for me to believe this thing? Like, would this hold up against the scrutiny of the people I trust? How did I even get from point A to point B in my thinking? What evidence would convince me to change my mind? What if I had been born into a different family or a different culture during a different time period? Would those beliefs be different? And all of those mental thought experiments can help you see that there is fragility in your beliefs.
You know, that is such a, the story of Ingrid really is a fascinating one, and obviously your new book is filled with fantastic stories through conversations that you've had on your show. And I'm curious. Well, actually, two things, but I'm not going to ask the questions all at one time. But as we're talking about beliefs, and since you had brought that up, and it's such an important topic, is there, better yet, share a belief with us that you had early in life that you discovered later wasn't true?
Yes. In fact, I'm actually in that process as we speak. So,
Hmm.
one of the earliest identities that I think I ever anchored myself to was becoming a mom one day. So when I was like 3 or 4, my dad says, and my mom says too, that I would have these like, with my play set, I would have these fictitious phone calls with my neighbors and talk about my rambunctious kids. And I was always writing stories about my future family. And my whole world was oriented around the fact that that was going to be my future. And then fast forward several decades, my husband and I um, had been on and were on for a very focused period of time, a 6 or 7 year journey in which we were trying to start a family. And we faced multiple barriers and obstacles and disappointments and heartbreaks and, pregnancy losses with our surrogate. And the whole thing has been heartbreaking and very, very hard to navigate. And one thing that I experienced acutely when I remember the night we found out about the second miscarriage, which was with identical twin girls, I felt like it was such a threat to my self identity and my self worth because I had grown up for whatever reason with this really firm belief that the meaning of life was in having children and having a family, and that
Mm.
my worth as a woman in this society came in large part from me playing this role. And obviously it's problematic for me to share to even say that because I no longer believe that that is true, but I absolutely felt that way up until like last year when
Wow.
in the process of writing this book where I really felt like, okay, without kids life lacks color. When I would imagine my future, I just saw it in black and white, and there's so many stereotypes around child-free women, so many biases towards that community, and so much overall judgment, right? Around like, well, if you don't have kids, then like, what is your meaning in life? Like, you'll never
Right.
experience real love, blah, 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 blah. So I realized that I was carrying a very harmful narrative in my mind, which was unless you become a mom through some means, your life will not have meaning. And the last few years of growth for me, which was happening, by the way, in parallel to me writing The Other Side of Change, I credit the people I interviewed for this book with the internal transformation I witnessed in myself, came from unpacking that worldview and examining it and asking, where did it come from? Why do I believe this? What's faulty about that belief system? Who told me this? Like, who gets to decide if that's true? And there is a total freedom in, for the first time ever, feeling like, look, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I will become a mom one day, but if I choose not to, if I stay child free, I now feel confidence that my life can be rich and colorful and full of meaning.
So, how far back, as you were doing this self exploration and really working through this, how far back did you discover that belief was linked to? Grandparents, even earlier? What did
Oh,
you
yeah.
find out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. Almost earlier than I can remember, honestly, because I think the
Hmm.
cultural influences were very, very strong. My mom's brother and his wife didn't have children, and I always felt like there were some whispers around them not having kids, and I just felt like my child brain was like, "Oh, that's not like the right way to do it." Or, that's how the little kid Maya saw that. And I definitely internalized so many messages from pop culture about what the ideal life looks like, right? It's like the home with the white picket fence and the two kids and the dog, right? And, I wasn't immune to that. I also wanted that romantic ideal. And, I think I was fed that all the time from the time I was, 3 or 4, just even just like watching TV, Sesame Street, whatever it is, right? So it's probably as far back as I can remember.
Hmm. So interesting. And the So I was going to ask you another question about beliefs themselves, but I want to pivot a little bit because there's another actually beliefs do tie into this, but there's another significant event, change event, life event that you experienced. And you began to talk about this a little bit in that you went to Juilliard
Hmm.
and you violin was your instrument. And share a little bit about that story, the impact of the life experience, the big change that you had. And I want to start to tie these two together because they really become foundational and they become the really the impetus behind your latest book.
Yeah,
And so could you share a part of that story with us,
absolutely. Yeah. So
please?
from the time I was 6, the violin was the center of my life. And I would rush home from the bus stop after school every day, practice for hours. When I was 9, I was accepted at Juilliard, and I that began a life where every Saturday I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning, catch a train to New York with my mom. We would spend the entire day in New York. I was in 10 hours of classes and we take the train home. And I just loved it. And so very quickly I developed these big dreams of becoming a professional. And I think that motivation experience, I feel like there was a surge in that motivation when the renowned violinist Itzhak Perlman invited me to be his private violin student. I mean, that was the vote of confidence that I needed as an insecure violinist who wasn't sure if she had what she would need, to make it big. And then I had my slight change of plans when I was 15 and I had a sudden hand injury, and doctors eventually told me that it was a career ending injury and I had to stop playing the violin. And there was something so curious about my grief, Jay, which was I wasn't just grieving the loss of the instrument. I was also grieving the loss of myself in this really profound way. And kind of similar to that motherhood thing, right? The motherhood quest. When when we sometimes it's only when we lose something, when we lose the dream, that we realize how much it had come to define us in the first place. The violin and me, we were best buddies, To this day, my right shoulder's a little elevated compared to my left because of all the hours I spent doing this in the practice room. And so I really did feel like I was grieving who Maya was, right? Every possible future was now gone from sight, and I didn't know who I was or who I could be. And it's taken me a while to learn a valuable lesson from that experience, but I want to share that with listeners because it would have been helpful to me then, and it is absolutely helpful to me now as I think about my relationship with motherhood. And that is to anchor our self identity, not simply to what we do, but to why we do that thing. So, what do I mean by that? Ask yourself, what is it that makes you love the things you love? When I asked myself what I loved about the violin, I realized that emotional connection was at the core. I loved the idea that music gave me a vehicle for feeling deeply connected with other human beings. And just because I lost the violin didn't mean that I lost what led me to love it in the first place. That was still very much intact. That why was still a stable part of me. It was a soft landing. And if I could anchor my identity to that rather than the role of being a violinist, then I had something that could carry me through into the next transition. So if I said, well, I, Maya, am the type of person who loves emotional connection, the exercise becomes, well, through what other outlets can I find emotional connection? How else can I express this part of myself? And it turns out that subconsciously, I sort of did that, right? I became a cognitive scientist and I study the science of connection. My podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, is all about forging deep emotional connections with people. Writing The Other Side of Change involved years of deep, deep bonding with the people that I profile in the book, right? So many hours over the course of many different sessions, just unpacking every nuance of their lives. Everything in my life has been in pursuit of feeling close to others and having others feel close to me. And um, I share this insight because I want everyone to ask themselves as they're listening to this, what is their why? What is the thing that makes them tick? Maybe it is improving at a craft. Maybe it's giving back to their community. Maybe it is showing empathy for people in need. Maybe it's having a creative outlet. Whatever your why is, ground your identity in those terms And then when life inevitably makes other plans for you, you still will feel fully intact, right? You will feel like there's at least some North Star that can help guide you forward as you figure out what comes next. And on the personal front, this is actually what I'm doing. I'm asking myself, what is it that I was craving from motherhood? Right? What do I, aside from all the societal pressures and the stigma and whatnot, um,
Right.
I want to ask myself in my core, why have I always wanted to be a mom? And is it possible to find those same elements in other, or some of those elements in other places? And so I'm in this exploratory phase in my thinking.
So let's just talk about that for just a moment. So
Mhm.
as you're exploring that, and let me back up for just one second because I want everybody who's watching and listening right now to, number one, definitely go check out Maya's podcast. We're going to provide links to that. We're going to provide links where you can purchase her new book as well. But one of the things that I really appreciate about you as a guide and as a host is that you work through some of the biggest life challenges. Almost, it feels like you're doing it in real time, where
I am.
you're, I can feel it. And not only are you giving of your insights and your knowledge, right? But you're receiving and you're sharing, you're processing information during the conversation. And I love that because it doesn't come across as, it's not scripted, it's not staged, it's real. And that's the beautiful thing about you, about the gift that you bring to all of us each week through your podcast. And I really appreciate that. So, what you just said about processing the motherhood piece, what you attach to the meaning to motherhood that you're providing today, right? Because it's you're still able to give that. It's just done in a different way.
Yeah.
So what is it that you attach to motherhood that you feel today you are still providing that same feeling and that same love?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I want to respond to what you said initially, which is you're absolutely right. I mean, I started I started A Slight Change of Plans. I wrote The Other Side of Change because I personally struggle with change in my life. This is of personal interest to me. I have not felt like I've gotten it right in the past. I was so eager to learn from other people's wisdom. And it just so happened that as I was writing the book, exactly to your point, I was undergoing a profound change in my own life and I felt the need to write about it, right? So the last chapter is much more memoir than anything else. And I never expected that there would be a chapter devoted to my own change, right? This was all unhappening. This was all unfolding in real time. And I just wanted to share that I think it's so natural for people to be afraid of change. It's scary. Change is associated with a lot of uncertainty. And we know from the neuroscience and psychology literature that our brains are not wired to enjoy uncertainty. One of my favorite research studies shows that people are more stressed when they're told they have a 50% chance of getting an electric shock than when they're told they have a 100% chance of getting an
That's
electric shock.
crazy.
And it's so wild, right? Every time I talk about the study, I'm like, really? But I resonate with that so much. I like having a firm grip of the steering wheel. I like falling prey to what psychologists call the illusion of control, where we wildly overestimate the degree to which we control outcomes in our lives. But when a big negative change happens, it shatters that illusion and it forces us to confront the true limits of our control in this lifetime. And it's a very, very hard thing to do. So that is to say, any readers of the book, any listeners of the podcast, please know I am in the same boat as you. I also found change and continue to find change to be very challenging, but I'm extremely grateful for the wisdom that I have now gained from spending so many years interviewing my subjects for the book, and also for all the scientific insights that I really use each and every day. To improve my relationship with change, to renew my own relationship with change. When it comes to my desire for motherhood, I mean, there's so much there. And by the way, I'm still figuring that out, right? This is a new inquiry for me because I just always assumed that motherhood was going to be in the cards. And for the first time ever, I'm contemplating a world in which maybe I'm child free. I think at its core, though, it is about caring for other people. and loving the feeling of caring for people. And I do feel that in many ways, the other side of change is like my little baby, right? It's my way of hopefully sharing the wonderful lessons I've learned over the course of my life and through, again, other people's knowledge with the world so that other people's lives can improve, right? It's my way of showing my love and care for humanity. And so that's just one little baby step, no pun, to try to achieve this why part of that goal.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. Now, again, for everyone right now, I know the thing that just really connects me with Maya's work is relatability, knowledge. I'm always learning, right? I'm always learning, and it's practical. So I'm able to take information that is shared, whether it's on a podcast, in a book, in an article, whatever it happens to be, and I can apply it in different areas of my life. But I know that many of you right now also are either going through a significant change in your life, or you have a particular belief system that may be holding you back. And I know I have, and I still do. I mean, I've done plenty of work on myself, deep work on myself. And it's important to recognize that no matter what it is you're going through, that you can move through it. There's help available to you. There's resources available to you. And that asking for help is okay. It's okay. So please, for everyone that's watching and listening right now, if you're going through a challenging time, I know the tools that we're talking about right now and what we're going to be talking about are going to be incredibly helpful to you. Do make sure that you're taking advantage of it and that you're asking for help when you need it. So, Maya, let's talk about just very briefly how change actually alters us. And I'd like you to get a little granular on the psychology side a bit. How does it actually alter us?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's important to point out a bias we all have, which is called the end of history illusion. And this says that while we tend to fully acknowledge that we've changed a lot in the past. So if you were to, show me 10-year-old Maya or 20-year-old Maya, I would feel a lot of remove from that person. I'd be like, wow, I'm a totally different person today. But interestingly, if you were to ask me, well, how much do you plan to change in the future? Are you going to change it all? I'll say, oh, no, no, no. What you see is what you get. This is the finished product. So we have this illusion that the person we are right now in this very moment is the version of us that's here to stay. We're done changing. But of course, we are always changing. And what I talk about in the other side of change is that a big change in our lives can actually accelerate this internal transformation. There's a reason I call the book The Other Side of Change. And that's because we will become new people on the other side with new capabilities, new perspectives, and new values. We will be transformed by the change. In other words, when a big change happens to us, it also leads to profound change within us. And it's easy to forget that. The reason why I share this is that when we feel really daunted and discouraged at the outset of a change because we feel we can't possibly get through it, there's some reassurance in knowing that the person who's going to be navigating that full experience, the person who is going to be the one who's on the other side of change looking back, that person will be different from the person you are today. That person will be a new version of you. And by and large, everyone that I've talked to, while they aren't always grateful the change happened to them, which is very understandable, why would anyone will illness or heartbreak into their lives? Of course. They're deeply grateful for the person they became as a result of the changes they went through. They do feel like they carry now perspectives and values and beliefs about the world and themselves that are freeing, that have empowered them, that have made them better people to themselves and to others. And I find there to be such a hopeful message in that. You might ask, well, how do you get those different values and perspectives and capabilities? And one way that happens is that change can serve as a moment of reckoning, as a point of revelation. So it's interesting. We we can see the big negative changes in our lives as an apocalypse of sorts, right? Like the world we knew and grew comfortable with is no longer available to us. And there's something really interesting about the word apocalypse, which is that it actually comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means revelation. And so this etymology is very instructive because, yes, change can upend us, but it can also reveal things to us, things that were hidden from view up until that point. And oftentimes, we need to see the full picture of who we are, right? Beliefs that we are laboring under. For example, I don't know if I would have ever re-examined my relationship with motherhood and how much of my self-worth I was putting into that bucket had it not been for this change, right? These moments give us a moment to step back, to ask ourselves about the current state of affairs, and then to be authors of the new narratives that we build for ourselves. And so we can actually, and my argument in the book is that we can shape that trajectory if we know the right questions to ask, the right scientific tools to use, the right thought experiments to engage in. And that's why in the book, I give people what I call a change survival kit, because I actually want
Yes.
them to have a means to an end, right? When I was going through some of the hardest times in my life, Jay, people would be like, Maya, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your reaction. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good, but how the heck do I actually do that?
Hmm.
There's not like there's a switch in my brain I can flip on that's like, yep, I feel more peaceful. I feel more enlightened. I feel more whatever, hopeful about this change. And so my guiding mission in all of this was to say, okay, if you're looking to change your relationship with change, here's the blueprint. Here's how you can actually get from point A to point B and to start to feel and think differently about what you're going through.
Yes, and you've done such a phenomenal job. That those strategies, that toolkit it's deep in nature and it covers a wide range of areas that we can all work on. So let me ask you this for our listeners and those that are watching right now, if they are going through some significant life change and they're feeling stuck and they don't have a support group around them, what would be, and let's say they haven't come across your book yet, although they're going to, right? And they're going to come across this conversation as well. But what would be the first step that you would recommend to somebody who is just in that place and they don't have someone to
Yes.
talk to?
And by the way, I have been in that period of stuckedness, if that's a word. And because my grief has felt so personal and so private, I haven't wanted to talk to other people about it. So there are also situations where people have people they could talk to, but they don't want to. It's so painful sometimes to have to, it's almost like if you say it out loud, it becomes real. And it's
Right.
exhausting to talk about what you're going through. So I really empathize with people in this position. I would So one of the topics that I discuss in the book is about this notion of possible selves. So we conjure up possible selves all the time when we live our lives. And they come in a couple buckets. There are hoped for selves, which reflect our dreams and aspirations. There are feared selves, which reflect our anxieties and worries. And then there are expected selves, which are the versions of us that we just think are likely to come true, good or bad, just given the reality. So you're like, yes, I'd love to be a singer songwriter. I'm going to be a cognitive scientist in 5 years. Sorry to say it, Maya, right? Um, what's interesting about these big inflection points is that they can often lead to all those hoped for selves kind of disappearing from view and a lot of feared selves emerging in our newly constrained environment. And we often impose a lot of stereotypes and expectations onto the situation about what possible futures are available to us in these new circumstances. So we might have assumptions about the kind of life a person who's a full-time caregiver can lead, or the possible selves available to a widow or a high school dropout or a teen mom or someone who's incarcerated or someone who's unemployed. And what we know from the research is that our brains often needlessly constrain our imagination. And what we know from the research is that our brains often needlessly constrain us when it comes to the futures that we imagine for ourselves. And one way to break out of this, to break out of that feeling that you are stuck in a vision of what your future is going to be and you're stuck in the here and now, is to invite moments of what's called moral elevation into your life. So, moral elevation is the warm, fuzzy feeling we get in our chests when we witness someone else's outstanding behaviors. So that might be their self sacrifice, their courage, their resilience, their empathy, their ability to forgive other people. It can be any extraordinary characteristic. What this does is not simply make us feel good because it's wonderful to witness other people being wonderful. It
Hmm.
actually changes our brains, it rewires our brains. And that's because when we witness other people violating our assumptions of what humans are capable of, exceeding those expectations of what we as humanity can achieve or be, that cracks open our own imaginations about who we can be. And that is a first and powerful step for unlocking our full potential at these junctures when we feel like we are in a rut. So I go out of my way to be a keen observer of the environment around me because acts of moral beauty are actually everywhere if we're just willing to pay attention and notice them. They're at the coffee shop. They're when you walk by the playground and you see a little kid defend their friend from bullying. They're when you witness someone forgive a family member that they had grievances with for decades. They're literally everywhere, waiting to be soaked up by all of us. But we just have to be intentional about really trying to absorb and then internalize those acts.
Wow. That is so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for bringing this incredible book to life. So, Maya, as we are wrapping up, and I know I could speak with you for
I know we
hours, I
only
want to be
scratched the
respectful,
surface of this book.
truly scratch the surface. But the beauty of that is we've given enough information to, I know that's going to draw people in and they're going to say, I have to know more, right? And so there's so much value to this book. But, you know, as we are wrapping up the conversation, I've got really one final question for you and then an ask. So here's my final question. I would love it if you would share with all of us what one of the most difficult decisions that you've had to make in your life in the pursuit of the person who you are today. One of the
Hmm.
most difficult decisions you've had to make.
I've had to make a lot of difficult decisions, many in my personal life. In my professional life, there was one that I think carries some lesson, which is, on my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, I had the professional poker player on, Annie Duke, and she talked about the science of quitting, knowing when to leave something behind because it's not a good fit for you. So I just want to set the scene for a second. I fell in love with cognitive science the summer before college. I studied it in college. Then I went and got my PhD. Then I went and got my postdoc in cognitive neuroscience. And as I was entering, I think like year 3 of my postdoc, it was resoundingly clear that academia was not a good fit for my personality. So I remember
Mm.
being in this windowless fMRI laboratory for hours and hours and hours scanning people's brains. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't even talked to the guy, but now I'm looking at his amygdala. Like it just felt like it wasn't the social environment I wanted. And I wanted to be on a team. And, academia, you have to wait for that longer term payoff. And I wanted to see more immediate results. And I could just tell, I don't really think this is the right fit. And yet I felt so much status quo bias because I thought, oh my gosh, but I've just spent 10 plus years in this field, right? What does a cognitive neuroscientist do if they don't become a researcher and an academic? I had no idea of who else I could be unless I totally jumped ship, and became, a consultant or something like that. And so, um, I I remember having this really tough conversation with my postdoc advisor at the time. And he he could tell my heart wasn't in this. He was like, "You don't want to be Maya, you don't want to be here, do you?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? Why are you saying that?" And he's like, "Look, I can tell. You need to go do something that you really, really love. Okay? I know you still have funding left and you can continue this, but like go find another job that lights you up and that actually is what you want to do. And I don't mean like 6 months from now or a year now. I mean like start looking today. And I left the room feeling so disoriented because again, I don't like change. I don't like unexpected change, right? And yet it was the greatest gift that I could have received when my postdoc advisor gave me license to consider alternatives because I really had felt sort of just like locked into the system. And guess what, Jay? It was that conversation that ultimately led me to send a cold email to a former Obama White House science official. I interviewed for a job 3 days later where I pitched them on creating a role for a behavioral scientist and hiring me into that role. And it completely changed the trajectory of my life. And I completely fell in love with applied behavioral science, using insights from my fields and using them to improve people's lives. And that just wouldn't have happened if I hadn't known when it was the right time to walk away. And so that has shaped who I am today, in part because I'm now a practitioner of my fields, right? Which brings me such deep joy, right? To get to have conversations like this one with you, and to try to really help people who are going through hard stuff in their lives using the wisdom and knowledge that I have from my scientific training. Nothing makes me happier. And so, yeah, we forget that like when we stay in something, that's a choice too. It doesn't feel like a choice because you're just maintaining the status quo, but there's an opportunity cost to you staying there. It means you're not doing something else that could bring you deep joy. So I'm not saying everyone should quit whatever they're doing, but just, there's going to be moments in your life where it's the right moment to walk away.
Oh, that is so, so good. So here is my ask. I would love it if you would give all of us, including me, one
Yes.
challenge, one thing that you would challenge us to do, really starting today.
So you're listening to this in January. You probably have a lot of goals for the new year. And one of my favorite scientific techniques for actually achieving our goals is called temptation bundling. And temptation bundling simply involves pairing the hard thing you're trying to do. So maybe it's a tough writing session, maybe it's a hard workout with an immediately rewarding task. So something that delivers immediate gratification. But importantly, you must deny yourself access to that reward in every other context so that it is solely paired with the hard activity. Okay. So what does this look like? Maybe you only listen to your favorite podcasts with Scherr when you are on your walks. Maybe you save your favorite TV shows for when you are folding your laundry or doing the dishes. Or in my case, when I was writing this book, this sounds super juvenile. Apparently I'm 5 years old, but I actually did this following thing. I kept a bowl of candy on my desk and I was allowed to eat an unlimited amount of candy during my deep writing sessions, but I was not allowed to eat candy during any other time of the day. And so
Ooh.
subconsciously, my brain started to associate writing this very, very hard book with a sweet treat. And so I started to look forward to it. And it sounds so simple, right? But the exclusivity of the reward and the really hard thing you're doing can be a total game changer. And I'm telling you, it is one of the reasons why the other side of change exists today.
That is so good. So temptation bundling. I love it. All right. I can't let you go without asking, what was the candy of choice?
Oh, there are these coffee chews that I just really enjoy. I think they're Rio,
Hmm.
R-I-O, Rio
Okay.
coffee chews. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Maya, I want to thank you so very much for
Thank
joining
you
us
so much,
today on
Jay. This
Business
was
Minds
such a
Coffee
pleasure.
Chat. Oh my gosh, such an insightful and incredible conversation. I really do appreciate it. And for all of you, I want to thank you so very much for watching and for listening. I do have a quick favor to ask. Would you please take just a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcast? Let us know what you thought about this particular episode with Maya, and leave a comment, please. As a matter of fact, while you are leaving a review, go immediately to Maya's podcast, which of course we're going to provide the link, and do exactly the same thing if you have not already rated and left her a review. And to listen to more episodes, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button. And my friends, until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Make sure you pick up, wait a minute, make sure you run to pick up a copy of The Other Side of Change. And please do yourself a favor. Don't only read it, apply the lessons you learn. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.